Jolene Cummings was last seen on May 12, 2018, at her hairstylist job at Tangle Salon in Fernandina Beach, Florida. Her shift ended at 5 p.m., and the following day, which happened to be both Mother's Day and her 34th birthday, she was supposed to meet her ex-husband in Hilliard, Florida, to pick up their 3 children. However, Jolene never arrived to get her children and has never been heard from again. Concerned for her well-being, Jolene's mother reported her missing on May 14th. The last person known to have seen Jolene was a co-worker named Jennifer Marie Sibbert, who had worked at Tangle Salon for just about a month. When police attempted to question Sibbert on May 14th, they discovered that she hadn't shown up for work that day. Further investigation revealed that the home address she had provided to the salon owner was fake. The next day, on May 15th, Jolene's car, a beige 2006 Ford Expedition with Florida license plate 035KBQ, was found abandoned in a parking lot on Florida A1A near a Home Depot store in Yulee, Florida. Surveillance footage from the area showed the vehicle being parked at 1:17 a.m. on May 13th, just hours after Jolene would have left work. The person seen driving the car was not Jolene, but Jennifer Sibbert. On May 16th, Sibbert was found sleeping in her own car at a rest area on Interstate 95 in St. Johns County, Florida, and was arrested on charges of grand theft auto for driving Jolene's car. At the time of her arrest, Sibbert had noticeable injuries on her hands, arms, and thighs, as well as a patch of hair missing from her head. It didn't take long for authorities to uncover that Jennifer Marie Sibbert wasn't her real name. Investigators discovered that Sibbert had been living under a stolen identity, using the name and social security number of a deceased teenager from Pennsylvania. The real Sibbert, a 16-year-old girl, had tragically died in a car crash in Germany in 1987. Sibbert's true identity was revealed to be Kimberly Lee Kessler, a woman originally from Butler, Pennsylvania, who had vanished in 2004 and hadn't been reported missing until 8 years later, in 2012. Kessler had spent years living under multiple aliases, using at least 17 different names, and living in 33 cities across 14 states since 1996. Authorities learned that she frequently gathered aliases by visiting cemeteries in her hometown of Butler and pulling names from gravestones. Kessler was charged with possession of a counterfeit passport in addition to the grand theft auto charge. People who knew Kessler described her as secretive, paranoid, and strange. According to clients and co-workers at Tangle Salon, there had been noticeable tension between Jolene and Kessler. Jolene reportedly didn't like Kessler and found her behavior suspicious. Just days before her disappearance, Jolene had confided in another co-worker that she believed Kessler was not the person that she says she is, and that she planned to investigate Kessler's background. In September 2018, authorities charged Kessler with first-degree premeditated murder in connection to Jolene's disappearance, believing that Jolene had been murdered inside Tangle Salon the night she went missing. After Kessler abandoned Jolene's car, surveillance footage showed her walking to a nearby gas station, where she bought a bottle of water and used an employee's phone to call a taxi. The gas station employee noted that Kessler had visible scratches on her face that resembled finger marks. The taxi driver who picked her up said that she spoke about religion during the ride and that he dropped her off near Tangle Salon. The driver saw her get into her own car before he left. Police found extensive blood evidence at Tangle Salon. Bloodstains were discovered on 2 chairs, on the walls and cabinets, in the sink drain, and on various items, including a display stand, a vacuum cleaner, a bleach bottle, and a mop. Blood belonging to both Jolene and Kessler was found at the scene. It was clear that someone had tried to clean up the crime scene, as the floor had been mopped to remove blood. Police also discovered a blood-stained blue tote bag in the woods that Kessler had discarded. Forensic testing found Jolene's blood on Kessler's boots, a sock, and a pair of scissors, as well as inside a storage unit that Kessler had rented. One of Jolene's fingernails was also found inside a bin in that storage unit. Investigators dug deeper into Kessler's online search history and uncovered chilling details. On May 4th, just over a week before Jolene vanished, Kessler had searched online for topics like how to tie a tourniquet, how to inject someone with something, and co-worker guilty of murder, missing person body not found. In a span of 48 hours, Kessler had conducted 457 searches related to Jolene's name. In the days leading up to Jolene's disappearance, Kessler purchased large zip ties from a boating supply store, as well as 30-gallon trash bags, an electric knife, and a bottle of ammonia from Walmart. Based on surveillance footage that showed Kessler dumping a white trash bag into a dumpster near Tangle's salon, investigators launched a search for Jolene's remains at a landfill in Charlton County, Georgia. Although they found several items of interest, Jolene's body was never located. After her arrest, Kessler's behavior in jail became increasingly erratic. She went on multiple hunger strikes, losing more than half of her body weight. She accused jail staff of trying to poison her and frequently displayed bizarre behavior, such as stripping naked and smearing feces in her cell. She also refused to cooperate with her defense team. Initially, Kessler was declared mentally incompetent to stand trial. However, a judge later reversed that decision, ruling that her behaviors were intentional and the result of a personality disorder rather than a diagnosed mental illness. In December 2021, over 3 years after Jolene's disappearance, Kessler stood trial for first-degree murder. Her defense team argued that Jolene and Kessler had gotten into a physical altercation at the salon and that the blood evidence was a result of Kessler defending herself. However, the jury wasn't convinced. After deliberating for a little over an hour, they found Kessler guilty of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite Kessler's conviction, Jolene Cummings' body has never been found. Mary Cook was last seen on November 14, 1970, in Highland City, Florida, when she supposedly left her home to go Christmas shopping at the J.M. Field store in nearby Lakeland. According to her husband, Leathern Earl Cook, Mary was heading out to buy gifts for their 2 young sons, ages 5 and 3, but she never returned home. The next day, Mary's white 1959 Cadillac coupe was found abandoned in the store's parking lot. Inside the car were her purse and wallet, but $200 in cash, money that Earl claimed he had given her for the shopping trip, was missing. Oddly, her wedding rings, which she always wore, were left behind in the car. Strangely, no one had reported seeing Mary or her vehicle at the store that day. From the beginning, investigators viewed Earl as the prime suspect in his wife's disappearance, and although he always denied any involvement, suspicion followed him for decades. Earl and Mary had been married for 8 years when she vanished. Earl described her as a devoted stay-at-home mother, yet when questioned about her disappearance, he suggested she might have left of her own free will. Over the years, his story remained unchanged, but his actions raised more questions than answers. In 2003, police, still suspicious of Earl, dug up the concrete garage floor of the home they shared in 1970, hoping to find Mary's remains. Earl even provided a blood sample during the investigation, but no significant evidence was found, and he was never charged. Earl continued to insist on his innocence, telling their sons that Mary simply abandoned the family. However, his oldest son, who was 5 years old at the time, recalls seeing his parents arguing on the day Mary disappeared. According to him, Earl told him to stay inside and not look out the window. That same night, Earl allegedly concealed something in a red blanket, which his son believes may have been Mary's body. He suspects Earl buried her somewhere within a few hours' drive of Highland City. After Mary's disappearance, her mother took in the 2 boys and cared for them, but tensions arose when she confronted Earl, asking if he had killed Mary. Rather than deny it, Earl reportedly took the children and left without explanation. Earl remarried 2 years after Mary disappeared, then divorced in 2000, married a 3rd time, and eventually died in Green Acres, Florida, in 2007 at the age of 66. To this day, he never provided any answers about what happened to Mary. Some speculate that Mary's case may be connected to another unsolved disappearance in Highland City, that of Peggy Byers-Baston, a young mother of 2 who vanished in April 1965 under mysterious circumstances. Both women were in their 20s, both had 2 children, and both lived on the same street. However, there's no evidence that the 2 women knew each other, and investigators have been unable to connect their disappearances. Mary's case has long been considered a likely homicide, but with limited evidence, it remains unsolved. Earl's frequent trips to West Palm Beach for painting jobs, often leaving Mary home alone for long stretches during the week, have led some to believe that foul play occurred while he was away. Haley Emery Cummings was just 5 years old when she vanished from her home in Satsuma, Florida, under mysterious and troubling circumstances on February 9, 2009. Her case remains one of Florida's most notorious unsolved child disappearances, a case that continues to baffle law enforcement and haunt her family to this day. Despite extensive media coverage, relentless searches, and years of investigation, no solid answers have emerged about what happened to the little girl who loved macaroni and cheese, makeup, and her laptop computer. On the night of her disappearance, Haley was at her family's trailer in the quiet, rural community of Hermit's Cove. She had gone to bed at 8 p.m., sharing a room with her 3-year-old brother and Misty Crossland, her father's 17-year-old live-in girlfriend. Misty, who had been in a relationship with Haley's father, Ronald Cummings, for 5 months, said she went to sleep in the same room around 10 p.m. By all accounts, everything seemed normal. Ronald Cummings worked the night shift and arrived home sometime after 3 a.m. on February 10th. He later told police that Misty ran out to meet him as he pulled into the driveway, screaming that Haley was gone. According to Misty, she had just discovered that Haley was missing from her bed. The back door of the trailer was ajar, and a cinder block was propping the screen door open. Alarmed, Ronald and Misty immediately called 911 at 3:37 a.m., reporting that Haley had disappeared. When police arrived at the scene, they found no signs of forced entry into the trailer. Ronald and Misty both insisted that the back door had been locked before they went to bed, yet authorities were unsure if that was true. The presence of the cinder block at the back door suggested that someone may have propped the door open from the outside, but there were no signs of a struggle. Adding to the mystery, Haley's 3-year-old brother told investigators that a man dressed in black had come to their home that night and taken his sister. However, police were hesitant to put too much stock in the boy's statement due to his young age. Still, the detail about a man in black has remained one of the more chilling elements of the case. An extensive search of the area, including nearby woods and waterways, yielded no sign of Haley. Ronald Cummings stated that his daughter was afraid of the dark and wouldn't have wandered off alone at night. From the outset, authorities believed foul play was involved, but no definitive evidence has ever surfaced. Misty Crossland quickly became a central figure in the investigation, with police and the media casting doubt on her account of that night. Investigators publicly expressed skepticism about her version of events, noting that she had taken and failed for polygraph tests and a voice stress test. They described her statements as consistently inconsistent. Despite her insistence that she had been at home the entire night and never left the children alone, police believed Misty was withholding critical information. They explored the possibility that Misty wasn't at the trailer when Haley disappeared, or that she knew more than she was letting on. In a baffling twist, just a month after Haley's disappearance, Ronald and Misty got married in March 2009. Ronald said the marriage was something Haley would have wanted. The marriage, however, was short-lived. By October of that year, Ronald filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and the strain caused by Haley's disappearance and the intense police investigation. The divorce was finalized quickly, as they had no shared property or children. One of the most prominent theories involves Misty's cousin, Joseph "Joe" Overstreet, who was visiting from Tennessee on the night Haley disappeared. According to Misty and her brother, Tommy Crossland, Overstreet had a history of criminal behavior and had sexually abused Misty as a child. Misty and Tommy later accused Overstreet of taking Haley. According to their account, Overstreet was angry because he couldn't find a machine gun he believed was in the Cummings home. Enraged, he allegedly threatened Misty with a knife, kidnapped Haley, and drove to the St. Johns River, where he threw the child into the water. Tommy Crossland was the first to make this accusation, and Misty later corroborated it, claiming she had lied earlier because she was afraid of her cousin. However, Overstreet has consistently denied any involvement in Haley's disappearance and authorities have never charged him in connection with the case. In April 2010, police conducted a thorough search of the St. Johns River, bringing Misty to the scene, but the search turned up nothing. In January 2010, nearly a year after Haley's disappearance, Misty Crossland, Tommy Crossland, and Ronald Cummings were arrested on unrelated drug trafficking charges. The charges were serious, involving the sale of large quantities of prescription pills to undercover officers. Ronald pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Misty, who was a minor player in the drug operation, pleaded no contest and received a harsh sentence of 25 years. Tommy also received a lengthy sentence. Ronald was released from prison in 2022, but later that year, he was arrested again on charges including battery, resisting an officer, and drug possession. Haley's biological mother, Crystal Sheffield, shared custody of Haley and her brother with Ronald, though Ronald had primary custody. Their relationship had been contentious, with both parties accusing the other of abuse and neglect. Sheffield alleged that Ronald was violent and claimed she had once sought a protective order against him, though it was dismissed. Ronald, on the other hand, pointed to Sheffield's admitted drug use and the fact that Haley had missed several doctor's appointments while in her care as reasons for his gaining custody in 2005. Following Haley's disappearance, both parents hired attorneys and engaged in a very public war of words. Sheffield accused Ronald of child abuse and neglect, though these claims were never substantiated. Despite extensive searches, numerous interviews, and years of investigation, Haley Cummings' disappearance remains unsolved. Authorities have never officially named a suspect, though Misty Crossland remains a person of interest due to her inconsistent statements and suspicious behavior. Haley's case has been reclassified as a homicide, though no remains have ever been found. Her family continues to hope for answers, but as the years pass, the chances of finding Haley alive grow increasingly slim. Ashon Kraton was last seen on March 21, 1997, in Orlando, Florida, after being taken by her non-custodial grandparents, Ernest S. Jackson and Kaya Jackson, also known by the aliases Ernest and Abiola Anderson. At the time, Ashani's mother had sent her to visit the Jacksons, but they refused to return her, marking the beginning of a tragic and baffling disappearance that remains unsolved to this day. The Jacksons relocated from Orlando to Tulsa, Oklahoma, in August 1998, bringing their 4 children with them, and it was around that time that Ashani was last seen. Despite their role as her caretakers during that period, Ernest and Kaya would later become prime suspects in her disappearance, though they have never been formally charged in connection with the case. In October 2000, more than 3 years after Ashani vanished, the Jacksons were arrested in Oklahoma on charges of child abuse. Charges unrelated to Ashani, but shedding light on a deeply disturbing history of violence and neglect within the family. The abuse charges stem from an incident in 1988 when their then 8-year-old son ran away from home and wandered into a restaurant in Teaneck, New Jersey, in a disoriented and desperate state. The child, who was covered in burns and scars, told authorities that both of his parents regularly beat him and described brutal punishments, including being starved for 15 days before being beaten with a belt after trying to climb out of a window to take fruit from a tree. His injuries were horrific, with scars all over his chest, shoulders, abdomen, collarbone, knees, and hands, the latter bearing 20 to 30 distinct scars on each. When these allegations came to light in 1988, Ernest and Kaya fled, skipping bail to avoid prosecution. They remained on the run for more than a decade before finally being captured in Oklahoma in 2000. At the time of their arrest, the Jacksons' children were located, but Ashani was notably absent, and she has never been seen since. Kaya was eventually convicted on the child abuse charges and sentenced to 35 years in prison. Ernest's case took a more complicated legal path. His first trial ended with a hung jury, and he was acquitted at his second trial. However, in 2002, Ernest was convicted of aggravated assault and child endangerment in New Jersey, related to another incident involving a child in the 1980s, and sentenced to 12 years in prison. He served his time and was released in 2009. Despite their extensive criminal histories and the disturbing abuse allegations against them, neither Kaya nor Ernest has ever been charged in connection with Ashoni's disappearance. However, investigators have long believed that the grandparents know exactly what happened to Ashoni and suspect foul play. Authorities theorize that Ashoni was likely murdered in Florida sometime around 1999 and that her body was subsequently transported to Oklahoma and buried somewhere in the Tulsa area. Rayfield Croom was last seen on the evening of June 2, 2004, in Orlando, Florida. He had plans to meet his wife at a Home Depot store located at Hiwassee Road and Colonial Drive so they could purchase a freezer, but he never showed up and has not been heard from since. At the time of his disappearance, Croom was driving his brand new white 2004 Ford F-150 pickup truck with the Florida license plate number E41ZVF. His sudden disappearance was alarming, and his family's concerns only grew when, 2 days later, on June 4th at approximately 12:30 a.m., his truck was discovered abandoned and burned on an exit ramp in Fort Myers, Florida, more than 140 miles away from his last known location in Orlando. The vehicle was found stuck in the mud at the edge of a cypress swamp, a remote and desolate area far from any populated neighborhoods. Witnesses at the scene reported seeing an unidentified man exiting the burning truck and walking away into the darkness. By the time emergency responders arrived, the man was gone, and there was no trace of Croom anywhere nearby. Investigators thoroughly examined the scene, but found no signs of foul play or any evidence to suggest what may have happened to him. There were no personal belongings inside the truck that could help point to his whereabouts. The location where the truck was found was puzzling to Croom's family and friends, as he had no known connections to the Fort Myers area. The only person he had ever known in that region was a longtime friend who had passed away a decade earlier. This left authorities with little to no clues as to why Croom would have ended up there. One prevailing theory is that Croom may have accidentally driven to Fort Myers, possibly disoriented or lost, and when his truck got stuck in the mud, he may have wandered off in search of help but never returned. Given that the truck was abandoned at the edge of a swamp, it's possible that Croom became disoriented and succumbed to the elements or an accident in the dense wilderness surrounding the area. However, despite an extensive search of the swamp and the surrounding areas, no sign of Croom was ever found. Adding to the mystery, Croom had a well-known habit of taking long drives, sometimes for hours at a time, as a way to relax and clear his mind. This habit may explain why he was so far from his intended destination, but it does not account for the strange circumstances of his truck being found burned and abandoned. Croom was a well-known figure in the Orlando community, having hosted a popular gospel show on WOKB radio for over 30 years. His warm personality and deep connection to his faith made him a beloved figure, particularly within the local church community. His disappearance stunned those who knew him, as he was not known to have any enemies or to engage in any risky behavior that could have led to his vanishing. Authorities have long believed that Croom likely passed away, either as a result of an accident or exposure to the elements in the swamp where his truck was found, but without any remains or concrete evidence. His case remains classified as a missing person investigation. Tiffany Heaven Daniels was born on March 11, 1988, in Dallas, Texas, before her family relocated to Pensacola, Florida. She grew up alongside her two sisters, raised by her parents Cindy and Rodney in a home filled with love, laughter, and creativity. From an early age, Tiffany demonstrated a passion for the arts. She was a talented painter and a skilled dancer who loved to throw dance parties at her home. Her artistic flair extended into her education, where she attended Pensacola State College and later the University of West Florida, earning a reputation as a creative and free-spirited individual who lit up any room she entered. Her friends described her as vibrant and magnetic, someone whose presence made everything feel brighter and more beautiful. Everybody loved Tiffany, her sister Candace once said. She is a light, and when you're around her, you just feel it. Everything gets more colorful, more beautiful. Tiffany's love for adventure drew her to picturesque locations, and she surrounded herself with people who shared her passions for art, nature, and spontaneous exploration. Tiffany was known for her love of outdoor activities. When she wasn't working, she could be found cycling, surfing, hiking, or camping. Her father affectionately referred to her as his butterfly girl, describing how her spontaneous nature would lead her to chase butterflies, losing track of time in pursuit of beauty and freedom. Yet, despite her vibrant personality, there were some underlying concerns in Tiffany's life, particularly around her financial stability. In July of 2013, her parents became aware that she was struggling to keep up with her bills. She had welcomed several roommates into her apartment through Craigslist, but many of them took advantage of her kindness, leaving her to cover most of the expenses. Her mother, Cindy, noted that Tiffany was too nice and often hesitant to ask her roommates for their share of rent or utilities, which led to her falling behind. By the time she disappeared, she was about 2 months overdue on her utility bills, and the electricity in her apartment had been shut off the day she went missing. To ease her financial burden, a man named Gary Nichols, a financially stable 54-year-old father of one of Tiffany's friends, moved into her apartment. Despite their initial reservations, Tiffany's parents were relieved that she was living with someone they believed she could trust. Nichols shared her interests in cycling and healthy living, and by all accounts, the two got along well. On August 11, 2013, Tiffany began her day with an emotional goodbye breakfast with her boyfriend, who had recently been accepted into a robotics program at the University of Texas in Austin. Although he invited her to move to Austin with him, Tiffany declined, stating that she wasn't ready to leave Pensacola. She reassured him that she wanted to maintain their relationship and planned to visit him soon. According to Nichols, Tiffany appeared a little downcast after the breakfast, though she was excited about her planned trip to Austin. That evening, she and Nichols watched Monty Python and the Holy Grail, a film tied to the musical Spamalot, which Tiffany was preparing to work on as a theater technician at Pensacola State College. After the movie, they both retired to their rooms, preparing for the early workday ahead. But sometime between 3 o'clock and 5 a.m., Nichols heard the front door opening and closing multiple times. He looked outside but saw no sign of Tiffany, assuming she had left for work early. On August 12th, Tiffany went to work at Pensacola State College to begin decorating sets for the upcoming production. Later in the day, she asked her supervisor for time off, stating she had some personal matters to attend to. Her request was approved, and at 4:43 p.m., she logged out of work. After a brief stop at her apartment, she left again, though Nichols, who was on the phone with his girlfriend at the time, didn't see her enter the house. When Tiffany hadn't returned by 10 p.m., Nichols became concerned and tried contacting her. The following day, with no word from Tiffany, Nichols reached out again. That evening, upon returning home, he discovered that the electricity had been turned off, prompting him to ask his daughter to contact Tiffany's mother, Cindy. Alarmed by the lack of contact, Cindy and Tiffany's friends began reaching out to everyone they could think of, but no one had seen or heard from her. After several days without any sign of Tiffany, her family reported her missing. Authorities began their investigation, though jurisdictional issues initially caused delays. Detective Daniel Harnett of the Pensacola Police Department took on the case, searching Tiffany's home and speaking with those closest to her. He found no signs of foul play, and her tent, often used during her camping trips, was still in her room, ruling out the possibility that she had gone camping. Investigators also cleared Tiffany's boyfriend, who had been cooperative and provided DNA samples. His phone records confirmed that he had been in Austin at the time of Tiffany's disappearance. The first significant lead in the case came on August 20th, when a cyclist familiar with Tiffany's family spotted her silver Toyota 4Runner parked near Fort Pickens on Santa Rosa Island. The vehicle, found at Park West, contained her bicycle, purse, phone, wallet, clothing, and paintings, along with a container of peanut butter and a jug of water. 2 fingerprints on the vehicle didn't match Tiffany's, raising more questions. Residents in the area reported seeing a man exiting the vehicle days earlier, but his identity remains unknown. Surveillance footage from the Bob Sykes Bridge, the only road connecting Pensacola to the island, showed Tiffany's vehicle crossing at 7:51 p.m. on August 12th. However, it was unclear whether she was driving. Despite extensive searches of the area by law enforcement and volunteer organizations like Kloss Kids, no significant evidence was found. Her family's hope was briefly reignited in 2014 after a waitress in Louisiana claimed to have seen a woman resembling Tiffany with two other women at a restaurant. The waitress noted that the younger women acted strangely, avoiding eye contact, while the older woman did all the talking. Unfortunately, security footage from that day had been erased, and the sighting couldn't be confirmed. This lead sparked concerns that Tiffany may have fallen victim to human trafficking, especially given Interstate 10's reputation as a trafficking corridor. Theories about Tiffany's fate vary widely. Some believe she may have sought solace in nature, as she often did, and met with an unfortunate accident. Others point to her financial troubles and emotional state at the time, suggesting she may have been vulnerable to dangerous situations. Her parents remained dedicated to finding answers, maintaining a Facebook page to keep her case in the public eye. But to this day, the mystery of Tiffany Daniels' disappearance remains unsolved, leaving her family and community to wonder what really happened to Tiffany. Some mysteries never fade from the minds of those left behind. The unsolved disappearance of Tommy Daniels is one such case, lingering in the hearts of his family and friends, haunted by questions that have gone unanswered for over a decade. How could a promising law student, seemingly on the path to a bright future, vanish without a trace? The story of Tommy's last known days is as perplexing as it is tragic, a case that raises more questions with each detail. Tommy Daniels, a third-year student at Florida International University's law school, was described by those who knew him as bright, driven, and deeply compassionate. Born and raised in California, Tommy had moved to Miami to pursue his dream of becoming a lawyer. He was active in campus life, living at a fraternity house, and working part-time as a housing administrator. His academic journey was challenging but rewarding, and by all accounts, Tommy appeared to be thriving. However, beneath the surface, he was struggling with something few people knew about, a growing sense of paranoia and anxiety that would ultimately become a central theme in his disappearance. On the evening of November 2nd, 2009, Tommy met up with friends at a popular pizzeria in Miami. The mood that night started off lighthearted, with laughter and conversation flowing freely. But at some point during the evening, Tommy's demeanor took a sudden turn. Witnesses reported that he became visibly agitated, his eyes darting nervously around the restaurant. Then, without warning, he stood up, muttering something that sent a chill through those who heard it. "They're coming to get me." Before anyone could stop him, Tommy bolted out of the restaurant, disappearing into the night. His friends, alarmed by his sudden outburst, searched for him around the area, but found no sign of him. They assumed he had returned home to his fraternity house to cool off. But Tommy never went back. For the next 3 days, Tommy's whereabouts were unknown. His friends assumed he was taking some time to himself, perhaps overwhelmed by the pressures of law school. But on November 5th, a call to 911 provided a brief and eerie glimpse of where Tommy had been. A concerned citizen reported a man asleep in a parking lot in Miami Beach, just across the bridge from downtown Miami. When police arrived, they found Tommy Daniels. He appeared disoriented, but otherwise unharmed. The officers decided to take him to Mount Sinai Medical Center, a well-known hospital in the area. Here, the mystery deepens. According to hospital records, there is no evidence that Tommy was ever treated or admitted. He simply vanished from the system, and since no one had yet reported him missing, his name didn't raise any red flags. He disappeared from the hospital just as suddenly as he had from the pizzeria days earlier. Tommy's family, who lived in California, became increasingly concerned when they couldn't reach him. His mother, who had spoken to him regularly, sensed something was deeply wrong. In the weeks leading up to his disappearance, Tommy had confided that he was struggling with his mental health and had started seeing a psychiatrist. While he didn't share many details about his sessions, he hinted that he was dealing with anxiety and paranoia. His mother later shared that Tommy's messages became more cryptic in tone, with him expressing vague fears that someone or something was after him. After Tommy's disappearance, his loved ones discovered that he had left behind important belongings. His car was found on campus, untouched. His wallet, credit cards, and other personal items were left in his fraternity house. Perhaps the most chilling detail was that Tommy hadn't used his credit cards or bank account since the night he ran out of the restaurant. It was as if he had walked out of his life and vanished into thin air. Florida International University's police department took on the case, given that Tommy was last seen on or near campus. But despite extensive efforts to locate him, the investigation has yielded few concrete leads. Over the years, rumors have circulated about Tommy's fate. Some believe he may have suffered a mental health crisis and wandered into the streets of Miami, vulnerable to danger. Others speculate that he may have encountered foul play, perhaps becoming a victim of a crime of opportunity in a city with its share of dark corners. One of the more troubling theories involves the possibility of institutional oversight. Why was there no record of Tommy's treatment or admission at Mount Sinai Medical Center? Did the hospital systems fail to capture his presence? Or did something more sinister occur during his time there? The hospital has never provided a clear explanation, leaving this question to fester in the minds of those following the case. As time has passed, Tommy Daniels' name has faded from the headlines, but his story remains very much alive in the hearts of his family and friends. His mother, now an advocate for mental health awareness, continues to search for answers, refusing to let her son's case be forgotten. Tommy was more than his disappearance, she has said in interviews. He was a kind, brilliant soul who had so much more to give. We just want to know what happened to him. We need closure.